and welcome to Lexington Remembers. Today's October 13th, 2015. Mary Gillespie started this program in the 1990s, and to date she and her committee have done over 40 interviews of people who have a history here in town, people who can tell us a little bit about what Lexington was like way back when. She also would like me to put in a plug for anybody who knows anyone who would like to, or knows of someone who could be interviewed for this. They're always looking for new candidates who have a history here in town. Also, all these 40 interviews are on tape, and they're available at the Lexington Historical Society, they're available at our new community center, and at Cary Library. So with that quick little introduction, today we are pleased to be interviewing Edith Carlson and her son Rick, or Eric. I'm probably going to call him both. My name is Beverly Kelly, and with me is my husband Peter, and we've known the Carlsons all our lives, so we are especially pleased to be doing this interview with them this morning. So I'll give you a sentence or two of an introduction. Edith came to Lexington as a young girl and met Herb, and they were married here in town. They raised 3 children, and they all grew up here. The 3 kids all grew up here in town. And the family owned Carlson Florist at the corner of Grant Street and East Street for 63 years. But we're going to get to that later, certainly. So I guess maybe to start, should I ask Peter to perhaps ask Edith some questions Edith, about family background?
I've been waiting for this opportunity. Now, as I understand it, you moved into town as a junior in high school.
That's right. I came in my junior year. Yeah.
And you graduated in 1941, and Herb graduated in 1940.
Yeah.
So could you explain to us how Lexington was when you moved in as a young girl and as a junior in the high school?
Well, it was a lovely town then, with a lot of love expressed around. It's hard. I came from Arlington, and of course, arriving at high school in my junior year was a little
difficult, sure.
Yes.
Left a lot of friends back in Arlington, I bet.
I did, and getting to know everybody here was quite unusual. Anyway, I was happily welcomed by a lot, and that's where I first met Herb. Was in school, and he had invited me to a dance at the Boy Scout dance at the Hancock School in Troop 119. Was the first time that I had become acquainted with anyone.
Was it, Edith, was it actually Hancock School or was it Hancock Church?
I'm sorry,
okay,
Hancock Church.
And isn't the Boy Scout troop still there?
It's still
the same
thriving.
One. Yeah, that's amazing after all these years.
And there used to be, every Saturday night, Miss Merrill had a dancing class at the high school, the old high school.
Now, where was the old high school, Edith?
It was Muzzy High School was both the junior high and the high school.
Okay.
At that time when I went there. And Saturday nights was a wonderful time to get acquainted with everybody because they were such fun to meet and learn how to dance. I think it was 50 cents on a Saturday night that I looked forward to going. I met Herb there too.
But the first time you met him was at Hancock Church.
Well, I met him in school actually first.
Oh, okay.
First date, you remember your first date? It was a dance at the Hancock Church?
Yeah, that was the first.
Troop 119.
The first date that we had.
That was the best date? It all downhill from there?
And how long did you date her before you were married?
No, we did. In his senior year, I was told that someone else was his girlfriend and that I could keep my hands off him. So I said, well,
And who was that other person? Do you want to name her?
yes, it was Barbara Coet.
Barbara Couette.
The co-ed crowd.
The Couette crowd. And that was Win Couette's sister?
Sister.
Sister, okay.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm 91 years old now, and my memory is getting a little rusty. But yes, and then of course Herb graduated and went into the service after the graduation, and I went into well, I had to take a postgraduate course because I wasn't old enough to go into nursing. But I went into nursing at the Lawrence Memorial School of Nurse for 3 years.
Oh.
And the time that he was in
Marine Corps.
in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And it was through a bouquet of flowers that someone got at the hospital that I got back together with her. This woman had got flowers from Carlson's Florist, and I told her that I knew the son at one time from that florist, and she went home to Quincy and told her best friend that there was a nurse at Mass General that knew her nephew. It was Herb's aunt, and he came home from the Marine Corps that December and called me up at the hospital and invited me out, and it was from then on
From then on.
that Herb and I
So it was the florist
Got
that
together.
brought you together.
yes,
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
What year, Edith, what year were you and Herb married?
1947.
Okay, after the war.
Yeah.
So he served in the war and you were a nurse during
Yeah.
the war years.
I graduated in 1945 from the Lawrence Memorial, and we were married in 47.
And
In the old church of the Episcopal Church of Our Redeemer across the street.
Right,
From
from
where
where the
you-
Redeemer is now.
Yes.
right,
And now that's the Greek Orthodox Church.
Yes.
right. That's where you were married.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Reverend Hanley married them.
Oh,
Okay.
a lot of people might remember
And
Reverend Hanley.
Reverend Hanley.
Sure.
Reverend Harold Hanley married them. And Reverend Harold Hanley married me also when I
Oh,
got married.
oh, isn't that's a good?
That's not
good.
a common thing.
No, it's not.
But
So-
you were married when you were 10, right? Only kidding on that one.
So now, where did you live when you were first married?
Down in, when we first married, we had an apartment on North Hancock Street because Herb was building this house at 6 York Street.
This house that we're in today.
Yes,
Okay.
he built that himself, and when we left on our honeymoon, it was only half built. There was no roof. So when we came back, we lived about a year at North Hancock Street in a little apartment there in the back of Amy Morse's home, and
And then you came, once this was done, you came here?
when it was
Mostly done?
mostly done, as we used to say, we had to, in order to go to the bathroom, we had to shut off all the lights because there was just petitions.
Oh, no walls, just the studs.
But that's been improved since then, I'm sure. But the house is, you've been living here ever since, and the house is complete now, right?
When my first son was born, Ted, Herb laid the floor in the kitchen while I was in the hospital. So I came home to
A new kitchen floor.
Which happens to still be there.
Yeah.
So that must, Teddy and I graduated from high school together, and Peter.
Yeah.
So that was 1967 then, that Herb put the floor in there.
No.
When he
Oh, I'm
was
sorry, when he
born.
was born.
He was born in 49.
Yes,
Sorry.
so it was 1949.
That's
So there was a floor there. It didn't take 20 years.
sorry about that.
Do the math.
Okay. So, but the house is, it's certainly finished now, isn't it, Edith? Or, well, no, I heard.
There's parts upstairs that are still not finished.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, you'll
just-
get to it.
well, we ran out of time and money, and it never has been completely finished upstairs. But it's been And I'm hoping, as I said, I'm 91 years old now, and I hope to stay here until they take me out, because this is
Home.
This is home.
This is home.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
It is
A
home.
lot of memories here,
So
for sure.
after you and Herb were married, did you continue to be a nurse?
Yes.
And did you
I
continue?
never worked at the greenhouse at all.
Okay, so
I
you
didn't-
stayed being a nurse, serving as a nurse. Now, after Teddy was born, did you continue to serve as a nurse
Yes.
around town? Okay. All right, but
I-
Herb
I
was
have-
doing the greenhouses.
I have all my life, even after Ricky was born, I've taken care of all the family and a lot of people. And it was very disheartening for me when I found out that I couldn't continue.
This
And
is
I
why-
can remember going to Fisk School with my brother, Ted, and so she'd work a shift from 11 to 7 at night, and she'd come home, get us ready, we'd go to school, and so she'd go to bed and sleep, and I can remember coming home many times when she was still asleep after getting out of school, and we couldn't get in the house because the house was locked.
Did you
that
come home
was-
for lunch from Fisk when
Yeah.
living here?
Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah.
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 And
You could-
sometimes your father had to take you, both you boys, down there. I tried not to work. I specialed after a while and would only work a couple of nights, so that I would be available.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us, either one of you, a little bit about what the Saddle Club Road area was like way back then? Because it's certainly full of houses now, and back then it was open fields, or what was it back then?
Well-
in like the 50s, maybe.
It was a dirt road
Grand
Oh.
Chester.
Grant Street was a dirt road.
Yes.
Oh, Grand Street originally was a dirt road. Yeah.
for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a big estate on the right. There was the Paul Bowser estate. He had a racetrack there of sulkies
Right.
that we could see from our house here up on.
Yeah.
Do you remember those, Rip?
Yeah, I used to climb a tree in the front yard and sit and watch the sulkies going around the track right down there.
And that was right up till about 1960, I think, or late 50s.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh.
And then the houses down there.
And then of course there was Boozer's.
Boozer's Farm, right at the bottom of York
Right.
Street.
Okay.
So it,
Had a farm
that was
stand.
all farmland
Right.
down on that side.
Had a farm stand there, and I used to remember. I think I talked to you of this before. They had a Coke machine in there for 10 cents. And so you could get Fanta, root beer, and orange out of their Coke machine for 10 cents when we were kids.
A good memory of
Yeah.
your
But I
childhood.
remember going to the fire station. They had a Coke machine that was always a nickel, all through the 50s. They had Fanta because that was part of the Coke company.
Yeah.
Yeah, root beers, all a nickel.
Yeah. And they, right at the bottom of York Street, going across Boozer's Farm, was a dirt path, literally going out toward Vine Brook. And I, back in the middle 60s, you could still go back there and hunt. And I would, with
Like
friends
with a
of
gun?
mine.
With a gun?
Yeah, you could hunt. It was a legal hunting area when you got across Vine Brook. And we used to hunt pheasants and ducks over there on the other side of Vine Brook, right from here.
And you did this as a teenager?
Yeah, we did that.
What did you
the
do
middle
with the ducks and did you bring them home?
Oh yeah, we'd stuff them, and I have a couple mounted still, and a pheasant that was mounted from then, and we would hunt over. You could legally hunt there in Lexington, right
Back
across Vine Brook,
in the mid 60s.
because there was nothing from there over to Woburn Street,
Right.
basically.
Right. Well, that would have been Joe Leary's land, who lived on Vine Street. And all that land, which is several acres, which he,
Right.
the town acquired not that many years ago. And then the open space that connects over to
To-
North Emerson Road or
Right, and-
up in there. That's
Well, we used to be able to walk out around
the end of Webb
Bowser's.
Street.
We used to be able to walk around Bowser's and go out towards East Street, right across from Doran's. And there's a dirt road there, and that was the way you could walk out, was going out that way.
Okay.
So anytime you were on the other side of Vine Brook, though, you could legally hunt here in Lexington.
Now, do you remember Vine Brook being wider than it is today?
Of course.
Oh, it was.
Oh yeah, by far. I mean, it was.
By far.
Well, they would dredge it out and they would use it for irrigation, I would imagine.
Oh yes,
for the farms.
it was used
Right.
for sure.
So you couldn't get over, well, even today you wouldn't want to go over because it's all marshy and, weedy.
Yeah, I don't think you can even see it a lot of places now.
No.
It's so grown over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't keep it open.
Yeah.
And when we built this house, there was nothing around here. Gus Carlson came about the same time we did and built the house next door. The one across the street here has a 18-foot, what do I want? A turret in it. And there was a barn, a big barn down in the corner of Grand Street. Our land goes down to the corner there.
Oh, it does.
And the barn that used to be down in there where the first house is
Right.
down there, that used to be a big barn.
Oh.
And I can remember when it was torn down, I can remember cutting myself bad in there one time because there was a big rock wall as the back of the barn that was right there.
And did your mother stitch you up?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Well, you said something about some caves that used to be down somewhere.
Yeah, well, as a kid, we
Down
used to
there.
go to further down Grand Street, just where it starts to turn, and up on the hills there that lead up to Granny Pond, there's big rock formations that literally had caves that you could crawl into, but the rocks were separated.
Huh.
And we used to go over there, and it was a perfect place to throw snowballs at cars coming around Grand Street because you could hide. This was in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
Things were different then, you know?
So if we go back where Edith was in her early years here in the 40s, and starting your family and raising your family here, your husband, Herb, did he have a sibling that helped out at the greenhouses in the florist? Or was it his mother and father that ran it?
No, his mother and father ran that. His mother ran that.
I remember
for
you.
years. She was the florist, and she really, that was her whole life, was that greenhouse.
But Herb worked
And
there
they
all
had-
his years, didn't he?
All his life, yeah.
Yes.
He worked there entirely.
So he was the grower, and his
He was
mother,
everything.
Yeah, he fixed the cars, fixed the buildings, fixed the heat.
he was everything.
He did everything.
He did everything, and when he died, I had to hire 10 people to take his one place.
Really?
Oh, on the work down at the greenhouse.
Yeah.
Wow.
He fixed cars. He ran the business. He did the floral work. He drove, and he was building this house at the same time. He just was amazing.
But it was his mother, Herb's mother, who was the florist.
Right.
Well,
And father.
they
And the
both did,
father.
but she was the one that really
Did all the daily work.
Yeah.
Now was Herb's father named Herb too?
Johannes. JT.
He was a
JT.
JT.
Okay.
He was another Theodore. The Theodore name, was Johannes Theodore Carlson. We've named Robert Theodore Carlson. His son is Jonas Theodore Carlson. And we have a great-grandchild that is Ezra Theodore.
Oh, that's great.
So the
That's
name
wonderful. It has been carried on.
Yeah.
When
So-
did Herb's father pass away?
1970.
71.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So Herb ran it after.
1970. He died in 1970. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so-
when did his mother die?
Oh, she didn't die till
No.
1984.
Oh, all right, because I remember her well.
Yeah,
behind
she
the
was
counter.
93 years old when she died.
Yeah.
So the building that was down there where the florist was housed, which is where you live now, I
Right.
mean, not the same building, but
Right.
the lot.
The house I built on
And
that
then Herb and his sibling and parents lived in a small house next door to that? Is that right?
A two-room house, yeah.
A two-room
Literally
house.
had 2 rooms.
Do you remember it, Rick?
Oh, of course. I
Tell us about
I
it.
tore it down, actually, in 1996, so I definitely remember it.
Tell us about his.
It literally was right next to the show. In fact, the two-room house was built before the showroom of Carlson Florist was built. There was the two-room house, and then the greenhouses were there. And they didn't build the showroom until, that wasn't built until 1939. But the little two-room house was there from 27 to 39. And it literally, you walked into that house, there was a living room in the front, and there was a ladder that went up to a loft where my father and his brother, Uncle Ivor, that's where they slept, and my grandma and grandfather slept in a pull-out bed in that living room, and in the back was simply a kitchen and a bathroom.
In the bathroom.
And there was a little porch on the back, and that was the entire house.
That was it.
That was it.
Two-room house, basically.
And underneath the house were two huge boilers, oil-fed boilers, that piped all the water into the pipes going through the greenhouses to heat the greenhouses. And so the only heat for the house was literally coming up through the floor was a pipe about 24 inches in diameter that came up about 4 feet from the floor, went out through the wall and over to the greenhouses. And that was the heat for the house. Because the boilers were
heat from that boiler.
Right, the boilers.
Were the greenhouses used before the florist store opened? You
Right.
said that opened in 39? Or was
Correct.
built in 39?
Correct.
Before that, the greenhouses was supplying florists in town, or
Yeah.
was there still a retail part of the
No, there wasn't really a retail bar. I think that's when they were growing flowers, because they had growing
the
fields.
flower market in Boston?
Correct.
Okay.
And they had growing fields that went all the way down Grand Street, almost to Colony Road.
Ah. So then once they opened the retail part of it, they were selling to churches and...
You know, you did all the churches in
all the
Lexington every
churches in
Saturday
town.
night.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, I bought my share of corsages there. In the 60s.
I don't remember being the recipient of any of those.
I still got one to go on.
and I tell you something, I've always told people this, that working there delivering flowers all the time when I was old enough to drive and so forth. And of course, Saturday nights, we had to do all the churches in Lexington, literally, almost every church. We had keys to every church in town, and even a couple in Arlington. And so we had to make the flowers for Sunday morning churches and put them up there on Saturday nights. So I would do a lot of times have to deliver to all the churches, and usually it was like 6 or 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. And it was the scariest things I ever did in my life, because I would have to open the doors of the churches with nobody in there and walk up and put flowers on all the altars in the pitch black, not knowing where all the light switches were. I think I ran out of a lot of churches scared, because it was, one of the toughest ones, believe it or not, when it was built, was Pilgrim Church, because the only way you could get to the altar was going in the front door, and you had to walk all the way down the center aisle, go up to the altar. And it was a very eerie feeling with no lights, and
They wouldn't tell you where the light switches
no, they wouldn't tell us where the light switches were. So you had to find your way up to the Hancock Church. Was the easiest, because you could park on the side and just go up a couple of stairs, get right to the altar, and get right out again.
Right. That's funny.
He also did all the cemeteries on Memorial Day.
Oh, wow.
For
That's a big-
years. He
big
used to
contract.
plant, and several times I used to go with him, the old Soldiers Monument down at the old cemetery beside the Muzzy
Beside
High
Muzzy.
School.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
Oh, yeah, we used
He
to-
used to plant those things himself. See, every year that it was
For Memorial
that it
Day?
was
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
care
There
of,
was
yes.
something
And
there.
Veterans Day.
And he had a
Yeah.
list from the town of perpetual graves that needed to be, and
From-
that was quite a job sometimes,
I
because Lexington Cemetery does not have big stones. The stones are all in the ground, and you had to go look for.
He had to remember where they were.
Yeah, that's not easy.
No, and
Yeah.
some of them, they were facing one way, and others are facing another way. And it took a lot of time. Those Memorial Days he spent.
And I can remember going with him, and in the graveyard next to Muzzy, I forget what the name of it is now,
The Monroe
the
Cemetery.
Monroe Cemetery, we would plant flowers on Memorial Day in front of graves from the Civil War people,
Well, Cosgrove got the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yes, we had to plant those at
And
Cosgrove's grave.
his tomb is there. He
Yeah.
got it from the Civil War.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I was just going to say,
No, go ahead.
originally Carlson started off as Carlson and Brown Florist. He was my grandfather was partners with Arnold Brown, and they originally came from Nahant, where they worked in a flower business in Nahant originally.
Any idea why they landed in Lexington? Now, this would have been your dad's parents,
Correct.
and they came up from the heart. Or down from the heart, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and
Oh.
they, I don't know, I actually don't know why. They both came over from Sweden, landing here in Boston, in somewhere around 1915 or 17, I believe. And
Came for the cheap land, I guess.
yeah, a lot of people, I didn't realize, I was trying to look up the ships that they came in. I know my grandmother came on the American lines. I actually have a photo of her at the dock. There's a photo of her right at the dock getting off the ship.
Well, you're lucky to have so much,
Yeah,
many of these things.
there's an actual photo of her arriving.
This is
And
your...
my grandmother, that's my
your-
grandmother.
Oh,
That-
gee,
It actually arrived on the
What
American
a
line.
hat.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she'll probably come in, take pictures.
And my grandfather
great.
was then in
We'll
the
go over
Navy. Yeah, he
one of
was
these.
then in the Navy during World War One.
They didn't go into the florist business right away. She was a domestic, and he worked for Nordstrom.
Really?
What was that company's?
That was before doing the Brown and Carlson in the Hot.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about is I had heard something about a fire at the florist. When was that, and how did it start, and what happened? Do you know, Rick?
Oh yeah, I was there 2 hours before it caught on fire. It caught on fire like 3 o'clock in the morning, and
Ooh.
I had smashed my first car up in Newburyport that morning. I hit the on the ice on the Plum Island Bridge. I had slid off the bridge and smashed my 1961 Chevy, which was my first car. And so that night, my father took his trailer that he built and in the truck that he had, and we drove up to Newburyport and loaded the. It was in October, a very cold day in October, and we loaded the car on and brought it back and parked it at the florist about 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning that the fire department called and the place was on fire. And that was a young fellow here in town who had actually broken in and poured gasoline around and lit it on fire.
Really?
And he was convicted of it. And back then, that was 1969, and he was convicted of it, and his sentence was he had to go into the military.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he had to go into the military.
1969?
1969 was
It was a local
yeah,
fellow from Lexington?
yeah.
Okay, that was the punishment in those days. That was
Yeah.
Vietnam days.
He had
Yeah.
broken
Oh,
in
that's
a
right.
couple of times.
A couple of times before
that.
that, and then
Uh-huh.
this time he broke in and poured gasoline around and lit it on fire.
Wow.
And so they did save the floor. And my father, it was because of the Lions Club, basically, a lot of people in the Lions Club that helped
Oh,
rebuild and reopen the place. It was the Lions Club people that.
Strong
Was your
fraternal
dad involved?
organization.
He was involved with the Lions?
Oh, he was
program?
40 years of perfect attendance in the Lions Club, yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, he
Wow.
never missed anything from the Lions Club.
Wow.
He worked,
40 years, perfect
There's the best
attendance.
picture of him there at the 4th of July carnival, see, with his
Oh,
truck and his
gee.
Lions hat. He was the only one that had a purple hat. He wore that for 40 years.
Oh,
The
wonderful.
purple Lions hat.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Oh, that's terrific. Terrific.
I was away in Maine that weekend at a funeral of a family member, and when I got home and saw that fire, it was so devastating. And Herb and his parents were sitting out in the garage. It was a Friday because they had a wedding the next day, and they still managed.
Oh, they had to supply the flowers for that wedding.
Yeah.
And they
Right.
managed to still do
They
it.
still managed somehow. I could see them now sitting in chairs in the cold garage, trying to.
Figure out-
My father
Wedding.
manufactured the back garage into the florist showroom with the secretaries and the phones and the desks and everything until the front was rebuilt again. But they made it to the secretaries. May Waldron worked there for what,
Oh, I don't know how many.
35 or
years.
40 years,
Really?
and Britta Erickson. The two were secretaries there for almost as long as we can remember. and they worked out in the cold garage at desk with the phones and everything
Wow.
while the place was being rebuilt.
Very interesting. A lot of history there. A couple of other things. One is you mentioned about the Lions Club and people helping each other. I heard a story at some point about Arlex Oil helping you out in a big way one winter, I guess it was. Do you know about
Yes.
that, Edith?
I will never forget that. Herb was dying of pancreatic cancer. I had him home here with me.
And what year would that have been?
It was 1988. He died on Valentine's Day, which was a Sunday. But the Friday before, we'd had a big snowstorm. And unbeknownst to me, all of a sudden I felt that the house was very cold. And I absolutely didn't have any oil. I called a company and they wouldn't come. I live on a hill, and my driveway is a very hilly, so that with the snow, they decided that they couldn't deliver anything.
And this was the regular company you always use?
Yes.
And they wouldn't come?
They wouldn't come, and I didn't know what to do. My husband was dying, and we were freezing here. I called Alex Oil. I wasn't a customer of theirs, and they came, parked their car down on Grand Street. They couldn't get up the hill, but they carried the oil up by hand to see that we were kept warm.
Wow.
And Herb died 2 days later.
Wow. And you've been a customer ever since?
I've been a customer. I will
leave it
never
to
forget their
Leave it to
kindness.
Arlex Oil. Yeah, that's a good story.
Very good story. Very good story.
Right.
The kindness of others in a time of need is always a
Right.
good story. And so, how long did the florist stay in operation after Herb passed?
Not very long. I had never had anything to do with the florist, and all of a sudden I was left. I couldn't even really mourn Herb. The next, I was left with this business, and none of my children, they had all worked there during off and on, but they all had careers of their own, and they weren't interested in, taking over the greenhouse. And I tried to keep it going. The girl that we had as a designer was very good, and she stayed on and did a lot of the work there, but I had to run the business end of it, and my daughter helped me out for a little while, and as I said before, I had to hire 10 people to take Herb's one place, because he did everything down there. And we ran it for what, about...
Oh, just 8 months or so.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
my father used to let an old Marine Corps buddy and classmate from Lexington High School that he was a classmate of, or knew in school, who was in the Marine Corps with him. A fellow, Fred Yaden, used to live in the little two-room house still.
Oh, I knew Fred Eden.
Okay,
He was a carpenter.
right. Well, Fred, that's where he lived, was in that little two-room house. And I think my father was charging him $20 a month to stay there. Okay, that was the total rent, $20 a month.
$20 a month?
Right. Well, to heat that little house, you had to use the boilers that were underneath it.
Right.
So come November, after my father died, the first oil bill was like $3,000 for oil. And at $20, since the florist had now closed up, $20 a month didn't work with $3,000. So we had to tell Fred that he had to move.
So you weren't able to sell the business, or you didn't try to sell
No,
on the
we
going
did.
business?
Wayne Boozer, okay, bought the name Carlson Florist because it had the largest, both FTD, the Florist Transworld Delivery, that they had been involved with since the 30s. So whenever people from the rest of the country or the world needed to send flowers to somebody in Lexington, it went through FTD, and
Right.
Carlson's was the FTD florist here. So therefore, Wayne was very nice and bought the business, and just moved down to East Lexington there called Wayside Carlson Florist, because they had
Right.
Wayside
Right.
Florist in Concord.
Right.
And he called it Wayside Carlson down there, and just used it as a florist just out of a retail store there.
But he got his inventory from the Flower Exchange in Boston. He
Correct.
didn't grow anything
No.
in Lexington.
No, he did not.
So those days ended.
Those days ended, yeah. And I will say that Wayne, to this day still, every Christmas, Easter, holiday, Thanksgiving, Wayne Boozer still brings my mother flowers on each one of those occasions,
Wow.
and has been doing it ever since.
27 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Now he's
another
part
good
of,
story about.
part of the Boozer family that's still in Lexington.
Oh, they're all related.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're all
Oh, yeah.
related.
Yes.
I'm sure they are.
I'd like to go back to your early years in town, because you were here in 1940, and Herb graduated in 41, went off to the service, as you mentioned. What was Lexington like for you during the war years? What do you remember? Anything particular
Well, I
about
was
the
in-
blackouts or the...
Oh, yes, I do, Peter. I was going to say I was in training, but my father was an air raid warden at that time.
No, where did you live, Edith? Where did you grow up?
On Tucker Avenue.
Tucker, okay.
50 Tucker Ave.
50
Okay.
Tucker Avenue, down in East Lexington.
Right. They call it Liberty Heights today.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
where, who Mike
Leary
Leary's house.
bought the house.
Okay.
Mike Leary's house.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Edith.
Yeah, my father was an air raid warden, and he also worked with Michelson's father. What was his
Oh,
name?
Harold.
Harold.
Harold, yes, Harold. He and Harold used to tour things at night to be sure that shades were put. We had to pull all the
Right.
shades in our home to not show any lights, and it was a scary time.
And there were a lot of rationing, wasn't there?
Oh yes, we had those ration books. I remember I could only get one pair of shoes.
They were coupon books?
Yeah.
Is that what they were? Okay.
Do you remember the days of butter, where you mix the butter in the
Oh, with
lard,
that- oh.
in the color,
Yes.
and during the war years? I don't
Yes.
remember that, but
You just have to squeeze that to
Right.
make it yellow.
make it yellow, right? That's the stories I got from my mother and my mother's family who lived here during those years. Yeah. But things got better soon after the war, and while you got married in 47, you started on your journey of
And of course,
raising
then
a family.
I was in training for the 3 years in between there too, and so in fact when the war ended, I remember with that.
Was there a great celebration
Yeah.
in Lexington on VJ Day or
VE Day.
VE Day? Do you remember the...
No, I don't, because as I said, I heard it at the Lawrence Memorial, because I was living over there.
Oh, okay, you were living in Lawrence during
Yeah.
your education. I see.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not Lawrence. It's the Lawrence Memorial in
No.
Medford.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
long 90.
But you had dormitory, you lived in
Yes.
dormitories there during your
Yes.
education? I see. So that would have been in, through 45.
Yeah,
You graduated from your education in,
in 45.
oh, okay.
I was there from 42, 3, 4, no, it was 3 years. Yes, then they had dorms, and the Lawrence Memorial is still now about the only one that has a certified nursing.
School still
School.
associated with the
Yeah.
hospital? Did you ever have a job in Lexington when you were in school or
I
growing up?
worked at Sims
Oh, okay.
I was born at Sims.
in the
Were
operating.
you born at Sims, Rick?
No,
No.
I was born at Lawrence Memorial in Medford.
Oh, okay.
You had a deal.
She had a deal.
They were all my children were born at the Lawrence Memorial.
Oh, okay.
But when I graduated, I worked at Mass General for
Aha, right,
several years.
right.
And then after the children were born, I came and worked nights and special here at Sims.
So did you drive? Is that how you got to your job? Your
That
job?
was one of the first things that I did after I married her. I decided that I wanted to learn to drive, and I called up this place in Lexington, and I used to wonder if someone would come and pick me up, and it was March, and that I was learning how to drive, even in the snow and in the cold. But I took lessons and got my license, and so I was able to drive. That was a big thing in my life at that time, too.
Sure.
And even when we were kids, for some reason, we all were able to manage when 4 of us could drive, my brother, myself, before my sister could drive, and my mother and father, we managed with 1 car, you know.
Unheard of today.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we managed to survive with 1 car, whereas today, everybody that has a license has a car in a
Or
house.
2 cars.
Or 2 cars. That's the trouble with the roads now, you can't get around
Well,
anywhere.
you can only drive 1 at a time, I've come to realize.
Well, I'd like to add, speaking to that, you had a number of different jobs around town in addition to working at the florist. Where did you work? And I'm sure you must have driven to those places.
Well, when I started off at 16, when I could work, I worked at Stop and Shop when they were barely just opening.
Well, Peter worked there too.
Yeah.
I
And
was trying to open the doors in March, I think it was, of 1966.
Do you
Right.
remember working together?
No,
I think he was in 67.
I was there in 67 because it was Frank Quinn was the manager.
We had to wear those uniforms.
They had to wear those yellow and brown uniforms.
Colonial uniforms?
Yeah.
When you worked there, did they have a carpet on the floor? 'Cause
Yes.
It opened with a carpet.
Yeah, no, they had just taken the carpet out, I think, when I was
Okay. It
there.
was a bad idea.
And I had to work outside as a bag boy
Right.
first to start.
And they had the carts, you wheeled
Right.
out on those dollies.
On the dollies that went through the wall and out the thing and you put in the car.
That's
Well, I was pretty small, see, at the time. I was only 5'4" tall when I was working there.
So we used to put you in the box.
Yeah, but I was only there, I think, a week doing that, and Frank Quinn made me a cashier. So I went in, now I got to be a cashier. That was a
You got to stay warm.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to be a cashier. But then they found out that my grandparents and father ran the florist. So guess where I got to work at Stop and Shop? They had a florist in the Stop and Shop. So I got kind of a cushy job working in the florist at Stop and Shop, whereas everybody else was. I was able to work there, and I worked there for I think almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And
We had a lot
you
of fun.
remember the carpeting and then the carriages
Yes,
wouldn't...
we had a orientation. I started working for Stop and Shop, and I was trained at the Stop and Shop in Waltham before this new store opened. And when they put the carpet in, we had a day of orientation before the store was going to open. And this big trailer truck comes out and unloads all these carriages, and we're bringing them in, help bringing them in. And they wouldn't move on the carpet because the wheels had a slight taper to them,
Yeah.
which was not an issue on a linoleum floor, but it caused the carpet to bind. It was even worse if you put some weight in your groceries and all. It was absolutely crazy. They didn't know what to do. We were supposed to open it a day or two. Somehow, I don't know exactly how, they came up with another car, another carriage that had lined wheels, not beveled.
Yeah.
And so they worked on the carpet. But I'll never forget the orientation, and I don't know if it was Frank Quinn or one of the vice presidents or presidents of Stop and Shop, and they were so proud of this store. It had carpet in because this was 1966, and they told us all that in Lexington, they were so proud of this store because in Lexington, the citizens went to market. They didn't go to the store, and they were so they were so obsessed with the idea of they were going to open a market, and people would come to market. The whole concept of this specialty about it, and to me, it was just another grocery store. Across the street was A&P. Across the other street was First National. The 3 of them competed for business.
Yeah.
Stop and Shop one.
Stop and Shop one.
And then after I went to Northeastern, after graduating from high school, I went to Northeastern for just 2 years, and then went and worked at Grant's Gulf, next to the fire station for Jimmy
Right.
Grant. And I was doing mechanical work there, and literally was only there for about 8 or 9 months. And Frank Horgan, the service manager at Roche Chevrolet next door,
yeah.
hired me to come over and be a mechanic for the Roche Chevrolet. And that's where I worked for almost 10 years at Roche Chevrolet as a mechanic, and then last at the end as I was one of the last 3 employees when they closed Roche Chevrolet as a service manager. And that's when I opened my own coin business, Lexington Coin, down at 854 Mass Ave, January 16th of 1981. And so I've had that store now, Lexington Coin, for 35 years in town. So
Now you're up on the corner of Bedford and North
Hancock Street, right.
Folsom's
Right.
Fish Market.
Folsom's.
Nana Spa.
Manor Spa, no, the Manor Spa was out front.
Right, that's
This
right.
was Hancock Market.
Hancock Market.
The
you're
building was
right.
built in
That was
1919.
Right.
It was a
So,
meat market originally.
Where you worked, it was the fire station and then Grant's Gulf.
Right.
And then that's where, right next to Grant's Gulf, where the Liberties is today,
Right,
across from
was
the
Roche
Stop and
Chevrolet.
Shop, was where I remember Roche
So
Chevrolet well.
therefore,
But it was A&P
You kept-
before that.
right, it was
Oh yeah, I remember A&P.
So all my jobs there as a young person were
Yeah.
right at within
Right.
Those
500 feet of each other. They were all. I tell people today they can't believe it. I've never lived or worked any place but in Lexington my whole life.
Well, can
When
you
I
say
tell
that?
people that, they go, "You're kidding."
No, that's a true story. That's true, yeah.
Yeah, I
had
never
that
worked or
problem as
lived
well.
anywhere but in Lexington. I'm just glad I don't have to commute anywhere on 128 anymore because it's
Yeah,
a disaster.
no.
Edith, do you have any interesting stories about raising your 3 children during the 50s and how Lexington was?
Yeah.
Were your boys
Well, you know,
Boy Scouts?
when
or?
you mentioned, yes, I've been in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. When you mentioned the First National and A&P, I was remembering both those, and Selects. Remember the ice cream store.
Durand's or Brigham's? Or,
Durand's.
Durand.
Oh, yeah,
Durand's
we all
downtown.
remember
Downtown,
Durand's.
yeah.
Sure, sure.
They used to call it Selects too. All the children, high school kids,
Yes.
ended up there in the soda
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
ice cream place. And then Brigham's was next to, was it Ingles? What was the,
English Stationery Store?
Yeah,
or
the same
Foster?
goes
Foster
next,
store.
that's right.
was next door. And I remember Baker's
Oh, Bessie
dry-
Baker.
dry goods store.
Bessie.
Yeah, Gabe and
Bessie.
Bessie Baker. In fact, I took care of her as a nurse at one time. They were lovely people.
She went to Brookhaven, I think, didn't she?
And then, yes.
Yes, yeah. Yeah,
And
no,
the drugstore, there was one on the corner where the same wood, I guess it's still there, in the corner of Waltham Street.
Oh,
and-
Colonial Pharmacy was there.
Oh, Colonial
Reed's.
Pharmacy. That was
Reed's drugstore
Blakey's.
was.
oh, Blakey's.
Blakey was it?
Blakey's was not, I
Yeah.
remember, we were not allowed to go into
Yeah,
Blakey's.
yeah,
It had
yeah.
some very questionable things for sale in there. We were not allowed to go
But
in
there were
there.
several. I mean, Jackie Ray's was there at the Theater Pharmacy. They had a soda fountain, and Jaime Dudelsack had the Rexall drugstore
Oh,
Yeah.
on the other side of
Right.
the avenue.
And my best friend Bob Jackman, that we were best friends, we're still friends today. We just went on a cruise to Alaska this past spring together. When we grew up, we used to take our bicycles and work for Jaime Dudelsack.
Oh,
And we deliver his Rexall drug
yeah.
sales pamphlets in our bicycles, and he'd pay us a penny a piece to go all over town and drop them in people's mailboxes and so forth.
Oh, that's
So
good.
we used to ride our bicycles all over the place with the baskets on the back and
Yeah,
have these
yeah.
the pamphlets, and
Yeah.
Jaime Dudelsack would pay us a penny a piece to deliver those.
Yeah. I remember
pamphlets.
Jaime.
And
Yeah.
you didn't throw the whole pile of them in the trash and get your penny.
He had too much integrity. Well, there were some interesting stores. There was the Minuteman Cafe along there too, right near.
Well, the
Heine's.
Minuteman Restaurant,
Minuteman
I can tell
Restaurant,
you
yeah.
for a fact, my father and grandfather, I don't know when it started, they went to lunch every day at the Minuteman Restaurant.
Oh, really?
Okay, Peter, the owner of the restaurant, Peter,
Oppenheim, was it?
no, that was Peter's music shop next door. But the Minuteman Restaurant,
Yeah.
they would go to lunch every day there.
Huh.
And they would park in the back, walk through the kitchen. You walk through the kitchen in the back, out to the front counter.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as they walked in, Peter would have 2 hamburgers on the grill for my grandfather, rare 2 hamburgers on a bun, and by the time he sat down at the counter, he'd bring out the same thing. And they had lemon meringue pie strictly for my father. But they ate lunch there every day for years and years and years and years and years.
That's funny.
The Minuteman restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, you saw a lot of changes, as we
yeah,
all have, during
yeah.
the 50s and 60s in Lexington,
Yes.
raising your children.
It's been a wonderful place to live. I kind of hate to see all these mansions going up, and there's 15 of them on Grand Street alone.
Really. Yeah. It's
Oh,
changing
yeah.
the character of the town.
Where a family could raise 3 children in maybe 1,000 square feet, they seem to need 6,000 or 7,000 square feet today.
Right. I mean,
And we used to walk everywhere, and I took the carriage with these kids and walked them uptown,
I can also remember growing up here on York Street. I could name you the people that lived in every house going up York Street, down Grand Street to the caves on the corner, all the way down Grand Street to East Street where the Florist is. I could name you who lived in every one of those houses. And nowadays, I'm not even sure of the people that live diagonally across from me. I don't know their names.
When you're a kid, you tend to know everybody because they
Yeah,
have
but the kids don't go out today the same
not
way.
the same.
No,
They're
it's
all
totally
programmed
different.
a lot more. It's a
Yeah.
different world today.
Yeah, but they don't go out the same today.
is there
Still a good
anything?
town.
Oh, it's a wonderful town. It's the best. And doing a program like this shows people what Lexington used to be like. And it's still a wonderful place, but it's those of you that have been here a long time that helped make it what it is today. So we thank
Took care
you.
of it.
Is there anything else anybody
Well, I'd
wants?
just like to say that my grandfather, when he was in the florist business here for as long as he was, he constantly, of course he was in the Rotary Club, my father was in the Lions Club, but
There had to be some conflict with that.
my grandfather, he carried these with him all the time and would hand them out to people.
Yeah.
It's called a Smiles, and it was Carlson Florist, a Smiles book that they were constantly handing these out. People love them. They're all jokes and so forth, and they're really fantastic. But he was very great. He would hand them out. It's like a business card all the time.
The little magazine of wit and humor.
Yep, no, it's really good. It's all full of kind of great jokes in there. It's very interesting.
Oh, isn't that cute?
The sales.
Well,
And they used to advertise all the time. Of course, they had blotters. Back then you needed blotters to work with when you with the ink. And so there's a constant. I have a whole lot of the blotters. I even have one of the very first ones that was actually listed as Carlson and Brown. See that? Which wasn't very long.
so when did Brown stop being part of Carlson and Brown?
1931, I believe.
31?
Yeah, I believe.
Well,
believe it was
when did Carlson start again?
27. Started in September 1927
Okay,
as Carlson
And Brown.
And Brown.
and then
Yeah.
he was with Carlson for 4 years, or
Right.
roughly, and then
Right.
okay.
And even going back, there's a beautiful picture here of it was called the Lexington Board of Trade before there was a Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, it's
The Chamber of Commerce didn't start until about 1934 or 5, I believe. There was the Lexington Board of Trade, and this was at Cary Hall. They had a big floral display of Carlson and Brown florists, the Lexington Board of Trade had a big show they put on in Cary Hall.
Interesting.
And that's an actual photograph from there, probably
good.
about 1929 or so.
It looks like almost a Christmas scene.
Well, that was just floral displays, I believe.
Yeah.
Whew, pretty fancy.
And do you want to show what Lexington, what it looked like in the area?
You want the picture?
Yeah, the big picture?
This is what it looked like.
Except it's upside down.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get that without the glare on it. This was the corner of East Street and Grand Street. And you can see the florist, 3 greenhouses, and the showroom. And in the center here, let me borrow your pencil there, Peter. This is the little 2-room house still right there, with the laundry out on a clothesline in the back. This picture was an aerial photo taken in 1951. And you can see how Grand Street, there were growing fields going down Grand Street here. This was all part of Bowser's apple orchards over here, and which there's still apple trees in some of the house lots over here on Saddle Club Road from this. This was corn that they grew here. This is Vine Brook, which looks like the Charles River back in 1951, whereas today you can hardly see it.
Yeah.
And this was Porter Wilson's greenhouses, where Fisk School was built about 3 years after that right here. There wasn't a road going into Diamond, and this was the Burnham Farms here. And Cups had a greenhouses on Woburn Street.
Oh, my brother worked for Cups.
Wally Cup had greenhouses
They're still there.
They're still there.
And his wife told me a story when she saw this picture. Wally Cup was in an airplane and they crashed right here into Bowser's. And all he did was break it. They crashed an airplane into Burnham Farms here. And all he did was break his nose. She was telling me he crashed in the 40s or something in an airplane into Burnham Farm. Wally Cup did.
Yeah.
But this is all Keeler's property in the back here. That's the Fisk House that was built in 1875. That's the original Fisk House built in 1742. That house right there.
Oh. And that's still there today.
Those two houses are still there today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that was pre-revolution then.
Oh yeah, 1742
Yeah.
was the Fisk House there.
So all these houses were built in the late 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Diamond was built up over here, and the road systems were in, and now those houses from the 60s are being torn down, and even bigger houses are being built.
But you want a good tip? Buy some land right there. Buy some land right there.
Well, that's a nice way to end it by looking at the aerial view of the whole neighborhood where you live.
Wonderful memories, Edith.
Yeah. So thank you both very, very much for being
thank
willing
you.
to do this. This is something that will live on forever in the history of Lexington.
Yeah. You're part of the archives now, Edith. Like it or not.
Both are.
I'm afraid I've been one of the archives.
So thank you very much.
All right.
And thank you.